where x is. So we're plugging in 3. Y equals negative 2 times 5 raised to x. No, not x. 3. We're taking 3 and we're plugging it in. I'm asking you to evaluate for that x value. So in your calculator, you'll literally type negative 2 times 5 raised to the 3rd. Type it in, find out the answer for me, compare with people around you. Go. Negative 250. Good. That's what we're doing a lot of today. I think you're going to be just fine. Next one. 3 times 5/10 raised to, I want you to put negative 2 for x. Make sure you use the negative sign and not the subtraction sign. Go ahead and evaluate in your calculator and compare with people around you. Go. Doubles each week, which is why it's multiplying by 2. There's your function, 30 times 2 to the x, which gives the beetle population after x weeks. How many beetles will be there after 56 days? You cannot put 56 for x. Why not? What does x stand for? Weeks. So you can't put 56 days in for where it's supposed to be weeks. 56 days is how many weeks? If you divide by 7, what's 56 divided by 7? It is 8. Okay. So now you can put 8 for x. Take 8 and you're going to put it in your function. Just a reminder, this is function notation. When I write down f and in parentheses 8, it is not f times 8. It's f of 8. I am asking you to input 8 into the function and figure out when you put 8 into the function, what do you get? Go ahead and evaluate for me, please. When you input 8 weeks, how many beetles are there? 7,680. Let's go ahead and use units. Beetles. So I'm going to make a table for x and y. And we have x values at 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And look at your graph, and we should know our y values. So it tells us that at 0, the y value is 3. On the graph at 1, it's at 12. 2 is at 48. 3 is at 192. And 4 is at 768. I'm just getting those points from the grid. When you're writing an equation, because that's the first thing it asks us to do, write an exponential function, just means write the equation. You need the y-intercept. You also need what it's multiplying by. Look at this table. What's the y-intercept? Where is x equal to 0? 3. We did this last week. That's your y-intercept. You also need to know the pattern. So look at your table and think for me, what are the y values multiplying by? 4. Every time they multiply by 4. So this is a common ratio of 4. So the first part of this question says write an exponential function. Remember, it's a times b to the x. So it would be y equals y-intercept 3. What are we multiplying by? 4 gets the exponent, because that's what you're multiplying by. Y equals 3 times 4 raised to the x, because it starts at 3 for the y-intercept and then multiplies by 4. And then find the populations after 12 hours and 5 days. This is like the one above it. X, if you look up here, X stands for days. So you can't put 12 hours for X. If it's been 12 hours, how much of a day has it been? Half. So you could put 1/2, or you could put 0.5. It's been half of a day. So we're going to take our function, 3 times 4 raised to 1/2 or 0.5. If you do 1/2 in your calculator, remember there's that fraction button, A, and then B/C, but you have to put it in parentheses if you do that. So figure out that one. I also want to know after 5 days, so x equals 5. Evaluate both of these for me. They are different. One is 1/2 and 1 is 5 days. Evaluate both. So this is 6 and this is 3072. So pay attention to what the x stands for, because you might have to convert it to like a different way of measuring it. If it's about weeks and you have days, make sure you switch it over. We're going to graph this function f of x equals -5 to the x. We've not graphed something with a negative a value before. Last week I just gave you positives. Remember, you need to figure out what number is multiplied out in front, because obviously it's multiplying by 5, but you need to figure out the y-intercept. It's not just negative. What number is out in front right now? -1 times 5 to the x. So we want to go ahead and write it in a way that makes sense. The y-intercept's -1, and then it's multiplying by 5. So what do I put at 0?
-5.
What's my y-intercept? -1. And then it's multiplying by 5. Going this direction. So what's my next number? -5, and then -25. Going the other direction, you could do fractions or decimals. Next one would be -1/5. And then -1/25. But please remember that you can use your calculator for this, right? If you go to your table, go back to menu and click on table, then you type in this function and figure it out. So will you please go ahead and do that for me now? Because I want us to be practicing this over and over. So take your 5 points, we did this last week, and just graph them. You've got at 0, it's at -1. At 1, it's at -5. And at 2, it's at -25, which would be like down here, my fault. You also have -1/5 and -1/25. Connect those points. This is quickly decreasing. It will never touch 0. It's going to stay right above it. Make sure it has arrows. From left to right, it never stops. So your domain is all real numbers, which is that weird R, or you can write it out. And then range, it's everything below 0, because it never will actually touch 0 and it stays below the x-axis, so it's y values less than 0.